think it kind of comes back to the other conversation we've had earlier, which is the difficulty is in terms of a building is the portability of that information throughout its life cycle. So when you go and design a building, if it's a big advanced building and they're using BIM, you've still got 3 or 4 BIM models. You've still got a structural one. You've probably got the interiors one. You've got an M&E one. They never quite get put together. So this idea of this perfect digital twin never quite works out. And even if it gets handed over as this perfect single model, the people that then go and use the building can't actually do that much with that model. They don't really care about it. They care about, what do I need to do to maintain it? When this breaks, how do I fix it? When something needs to be serviced, what do we need to do to it exactly?
And yeah, you were talking, Peter, about how AI, it might not going to spring upon us. It might just sort of slowly merge in, and I think sometimes AI is sort of used as a dirty word almost, where people sort of just rebrand an old algorithm that's very simple and aren't using the term anymore. And I wonder if we will stop using the term and it will just be integrated sort of like that, or yeah.
Do you know, I've got an analogy for this, and if anyone listens to my podcast, the My Safety Tech podcast, they'll be sick and tired of this, by the way, because I say this all the time. But I remember when TomTom came out, and you'd say to someone, I'm using TomTom, and they'd be like, well, why don't you just get a map out and write down the directions, And it's like, well, I got TomTom, and it would always get people lost, and it would be on the paper because someone would drive into a field or something. And then we very quickly moved on to the point where now we're on Google Maps and Waze doesn't just tell you which way to go, but it actually predicts what the traffic is going to be like on the route at any point in the future that you decide, on a route that you don't know. So now it's this level of intelligence that's way beyond what we could have ever hoped for when TomTom first came out. And the weird thing is, I don't even know where TomTom went. I used to have one in my car. I don't remember binning it. I don't remember selling it. It's like they just disappeared and now we have an app. So we very quickly went from this resistance to sat-nav to now we just have an app on our phone and people use it almost religiously. And I sort of feel that's going to be the same way about AI, is that there will be resistance. There will be resistance to change. There will be this element of catastrophization, in part with the press. But in terms of what we're using AI for, in terms of really a minuscule application in terms of what we're doing, it's gonna be really powerful for our industry and our sector.
But wasn't what made digital mapping so effective was the data that came back from all the people using Waze and Google Maps so that they could predict it? And that's where TomTom kind of got stuck, because it was a secondary, it was a physical device that didn't have an internet connection, right? And it all comes back to get the data, look after the data, and it's something that I say all the time to everybody, whether they're consultants or whether they're managing properties. That information is so valuable, and it really frustrates me when you watch people just effectively throw it away or just not use it properly.
Yeah, TomTom was still going in 2021, by the way. I Googled them the other day. I was like, how? Who was still using them in 2021? Halfords were propping them up.
I think they use their technology to help car manufacturers and things with the built-in sat navs. But yeah, I think the big change there, let's say, was when the knowledge switched over and suddenly an experienced map reader was no longer faster than using these. And as you said, sort of by starting to use this technology, we were able to gather data and make it better and get to where we are now, which I think is I think a big topic for all of this AI is maybe starting to use it a little bit and gathering that data and helping us get to where we want to go in the future.
I've no doubt, by the way, that it will get better, because I've no doubt that driverless cars in 15 years' time, there will already be the technology that they will if you do a regular route into work, it can send cars off in different directions in order to proactively ease congestion prior to it ever occurring, based on how much traffic a road can take. And I've no doubt that that's already in that system, ready to go, so that when we do have driverless cars, it can direct people in different ways. So it's not just where we are now. It's like, even now with the tech that we have, it can go so much further, with something that's pretty well established.
Yeah. And a while ago you touched on the golden thread when you were talking about how we can use it at the moment in the fire industry. I did want to come back to it. And for our listeners, golden thread, we're talking about the thread of information when a building's being designed, and preserving that throughout. So that's always available to tap into. And I just wanted to really see if we could provide some more specifics for our listeners as to how that could be used, and how they could dip into that information and use AI to help them there.
I think it kind of comes back to the other conversations we've had earlier, which is the difficulty is, in terms of a building, is the portability of that information throughout its life cycle. So when you go and design a building, if it's a big advanced building and they're using BIM, you've still got 3 or 4 BIM models. You've still got a structural one. You've probably got the interiors one. You've got an M&E one. They never quite get put together. So this idea of this perfect digital twin never quite works out. And even if it gets handed over as this perfect single model, the people that then go and use the building can't actually do that much with that model. They don't really care about it. They care about, what do I need to do to maintain it? When this breaks, how do I fix it? When something needs to be serviced, what do we need to do to it exactly? And it's that, the cause and effect, the strategy, design requirements of every single thing. When we're us in fire, we're looking at things going, well, how does that fan work? That AOV, what does it need to do? Why is the fire alarm configured in that way? With those lines of compartmentation, why is that 60 minutes? So that somebody doesn't come along in 5 years' time and go, oh, look, there's an FT60 door, when it didn't need to be an FT60 door. It was just easier to put another one in. And then that starts getting maintained as a fire door. But we've gone from designer, principal contractor, first owner, it could be an investment company. Then you've got a freeholder. If it was a block of flats, that can then change. And then you've got leaseholders. You've got various block managers that might be managing, or housing association might be managing it. And exactly the same would happen in a retail environment. In fact, perhaps that, or in a commercial environment, in fact, potentially that building is going to change hands more often. So the difficult thing actually that I think is, how do you package all of that information up so that each stakeholder, if you want to call it that, can access it? Whether that's an FM contractor, whether that's an alarm company, whether it's a gardener, it doesn't really matter. It's everybody needs to be able to access these models and then go, well, actually, I've just changed that thing. It's now not widget A, it's widget B, or it's, do you know what? I've oversized it, this vent, because it was cheaper or easier or something. It doesn't need to be that performant, but it just is. And then that giving people access to that history, and that's the difficult bit. You need an information store, and you need 20 bits of software to go and talk to it. So to me, it's not, you might use AI to query some of that data, but the difficulty is going back to that data and updating it.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting example, because that's sort of a problem with or without AI, and it's just one that gets exasperated if we're trying to use this data even more. Unfortunately, time is against us today, but I just wanted to hear if you had any final thoughts before we wrap up. If I come to you first, Peter.
Yeah, I think when we spoke at London Build last year, I approached you and I said, we've just got, by the way, I love the fact that the fire sector is really leading on this and saying, we've got BS 8644, digital management of fire safety information. I was like, this is amazing. How do we now help the professionals in our industry to improve their digital literacy, to be able to work out how we ensure that we meet the requirements of this digital management in fire safety. And that's something that I'm really passionate and really excited about. And that's why I set the podcast. And this is why I love the fact that, George, you've got myself and Adam on here today to discuss this, because I think as a profession, as an industry, we all now need to be curious about tech and what it can do and how it can help, and start asking the right questions. And the professional bodies in the industry need to start providing training, start providing education, so that this doesn't feel quite so mysterious when it comes in. Like, we know how to use the power of technology, how to harness that power in order to improve fire safety.
Yeah, it's something that really interests me, because it's, I've seen technologies in the past that were rubbish and people have ignored, and then so at some point they've suddenly become good, and this does sort of feel like one of those, and something keen to support and for the FBA to try and help with and get the fire sector to where it needs to be with that. Are there any other thoughts from yourself, Adam?
I think I've probably talked too much, haven't I? You definitely nodded then, by the way. No, look, I think it's great where everything's going, and I think the more conversations like this that are had, the better, really. I think the main thing I think we need is just more transparency, more people sharing ideas and information, fewer British standards, more open standards.